All right, I think we're live. Let me just check the sound and the quality here. Looks like all the bars are okay. Let me check the stream health. As you know, I'm new to this. Still getting used to the streaming setup. Looks like the stream is healthy. All right, so we'll jump on in. So thanks everybody for joining. I appreciate you checking out our new Pokemon Rants. This is something I've been wanting to do for quite some time. I'll probably end up inviting a couple of guests, maybe once a month, maybe every other month. We'll see how it goes. But just essentially looking through topics, having an open discussion, taking questions from the audience, kind of going through, as the name implies, ranting on a couple of topics. And anybody that knows me knows how I like to rant. I rant on many things outside of Pokemon as well. So it's a great space to be in. And anytime we can do this for fun, why not, right? So I'll give you also the warning that we have some background noise. The kids are here, got the AC on. It's going to be maybe a little bit of a busy day, but otherwise it should be okay. If you have any time or hard time, I should say, hearing me, let me know. All right, so let's kick it off. So the topic for today is, how do you balance between Pokemon collecting and Pokemon investing? And there's many facets and many topics that we can cover around this, and we'll go in and out of a few of those. But if there's anything you want to dive deeper on as we're in a specific topic, just feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, and of course, make sure that I respond to the comments accordingly. So one of the first things for me around understanding Pokemon investing and collecting is, what's the difference? How do you know which one you're doing? And that really comes with a couple of key points around understanding and having clarity. I know PK talks about this a lot, or Pokemon Knowledge talks about this a lot, and he calls it set identity when he talks about collecting. But there's not too much of a discussion around what's the difference between investing and collecting. How do you know when you're doing one versus the other one? And so I think there's a really clear answer, at least for me, when I think about Pokemon collecting versus investing. And for me, investing really speaks to the point of, I'm willing to sell this at any moment without hesitation, assuming that, of course, it's at a price that you're willing to accept. And you don't have that regret and remorse and desire that you didn't actually just sell off whatever X product or collection was. And so for me, that's the key point. If you can say, I'm willing to sell this box or this case or this binder or this card, whatever it may be, and you don't have a second thought about it, and hopefully, in your best interest, you made a profit on that, then that for me is looking at that from an investing standpoint. Now, as you often hear in my channel, we talk about investing over a long period of time. So I do think there's a perspective of having a long, sustainable time where you're investing in something, and then you sell at a later date when the value is higher, when you can make a good profit margins, when the market has went up. For me, that's more about investing. Now, obviously, there's a loss in investing where you can still do all those things and sell at the wrong time and lose. That's still investing, not good investing, but it's still investing nonetheless. And for me, that's the key point, though. For me, collecting is really then about having something that you enjoy, that brings you a thrill, that makes it fun, that brings you back, whatever it is, weekly or daily, and you just enjoy looking at the cards or looking at that sealed product on your shelf, whatever it may be, and that's an enjoyment. And if you sold that, you would actually, in a sense, somewhat regret it. You would have second thoughts, that remorse, the seller's remorse, as they call it. So that, for me, is the difference between collecting and investing. And there's obviously many, many other things we could speak about, but I think that's a good indicator to know which one you're doing. So what does that look like for me? For me, this, and let's see if I can put this in the screen here. This is going to be collecting for me. So this is a binder. This is my my Crown Zenith binder. For me, this is collecting. I'm actually going through, I'm doing a full master set, everything from reverse hollows, as you can see here, to the standard, and from 1 to whatever the given set is. So for me, this is collecting. And I enjoy this, filling in the blanks, making sure that I can, go through and do trades, find the right cards to just really fulfill a binder. And for me, this is something I wouldn't want to sell. And if I sold this, I would have that regret. I wouldn't want to go back and say, man, I wish I would have kept that Crown Zenith binder. For me, this was something that I enjoy, and I want to finish it. And when I finish it, I'm still going to pull it out, and I'm going to look at it, and that brings me joy. And then from an investing standpoint, this, for me, is investing. This is a case, if you've never seen one, this is a case of booster boxes. And if you can't see it there, it's XY. I'm pretty sure this one was the breakthrough, if I'm not mistaken. And this for me is an investment. You buy this at original release date, much like you could do today for Scarlet and Violet or Paldea Evolved. And you're paying whatever the case may be. Maybe it's MSRP, maybe it's a little bit less, but then you wait. In this case, that was 2016. I think those are selling for roughly $700 a box now. So it's 7 times, roughly speaking, the overall price that you paid from the beginning to now. And if I was willing to sell that today, to me, that's an investment, especially if I bought that in 2016 and I held it to the present time. So those are the key differences to at least identify what the investment versus collecting categories really start to mean. Which then I think is a great segue into looking at your goals. And this is going back to some of PK's comments. Having that set identity, I think, is very important. If you're just buying to buy and you call it collecting, but you don't really have a goal in mind, you're not actually trying to achieve anything specific, I don't really think that's collecting. I think you can say that to yourself, but because there's no, as he calls it, identity, or there's no goal in mind, I don't really think that you have an enjoyment of it the same way as you would with actual collecting, whether it's fulfilling a master set of a binder, maybe you're a Gyarados collector and you want to collect all the Gyarados, whatever the case may be. Having that set identity, I think, gives structure to the goal and to the hobby, and that keeps you coming back. You know what you're looking for. You're not just buying random things, because I think those who don't have those goals will tend to just fall right out of it. They won't stay in. They'll kind of move with the waves, if you will. They'll go back and forth with whatever comes, and they're less likely to stay with any hobby in that approach over time. So I think having that clear goal as to what you want to achieve is really helpful when you're talking about collecting and investing as well. Now, investing can be a little bit more loose, and we talk about this a lot with Pokenomics, with a few others as well. I think Pokemon Classics talks about this sometimes. We talk about this a lot with PokeVault. So you see these topics in all the PokeTubers spaces, and it's really around making sure that when you're doing this from a seal perspective, that you're buying whatever the case may be. And in my case, this was a breakthrough set, and having that and setting that aside is less goal-oriented in terms of what you're buying. Now, obviously, you still may want to say you have certain sets that you collect, or certain sets that you invest in and you set aside because perhaps they're more profitable. And your goals tend to be more financially based, right? Because we're talking about money, we're talking about investing, because you do, ideally, plan to sell that product in the near future. So when that's the case, your goals tend to be financial oriented. So you might say something, for example, like, I would prefer to buy only the top 5 sets in a given series and have 2 booster cases of each one. They will perform the best, other than the worst sets, comparatively speaking. And from that point of view, then my goal is that I'm going to maximize my gains in a, let's call it 7-year, 8-year timeline. And so in 8 years, I now have 2 cases of each of the best sets, and I plan to make X, Y, or Z profits, depending on where the market is at that time. So that's where the goals come in from a investment perspective, whereas the goals from a collecting perspective may be something more aligned to again, what you're looking to collect. For me, it's going to be a master set. I'm trying to do a Sword and Shield master set for every set in Sword and Shield, including the promos. So that was one of the first things that I was looking at in terms of collecting when I got in. And I'm doing pretty good. Actually, I'm happy to share. I brought this up just in case I wanted to bring it and show it on screen. But let me see if I can just quickly share this with you. So this is, if you don't use the platform, I'm not affiliated with the platform in any way. It's just the one I use. I happen to like it a lot. Here is basically my collection live as we speak. Now, I do have cards I haven't inventoried yet, so it's not full, but it's, 80% of what I probably have that's actually in a binder, in a sleeve. It's part of my personal collection. So as I stated, I started off with Sword and Shield, and now, of course, working with Scarlet and Violet. And my goal as a collector was to have a master set of every set in Sword and Shield, including the promos. So, this is how I'm tracking. And again, I'm happy to share this. I'm sorry, wrong screen. I'm happy to share this. So I'm doing pretty good. I'm over 60%, even really over 70% for most of these sets. With obviously some of the earlier sets not doing as well, especially Champion's Path and Darkness Ablaze. But otherwise, doing pretty good in Sword and Shield. And so this, for me, was one of my collection goals. I want to have every set in Sword and Shield and have it as a master set. And you can kind of see that here behind me, other side. Behind me here, in each one of those binders is actually my master sets. For Sword and Shield. Now, I'll do the same thing for pretty much every other series. I have a larger goal, of which I'll do the same for pretty much every series. Now, obviously, I'm a lot behind when it comes to Sun and Moon and XY, even Black and White. I have probably more when it comes to base set, Gem Heroes and Neo Genesis. Those I'm doing pretty good on. I'm tracking pretty well. But I think I'm focusing primarily on Sword and Shield first. And for me, this is a lot easier because I'm also buying out collections, which have a lot of different cards in those. And then, of course, I organize and sort those accordingly. So just as an example, this was my set goal. This is what I wanted to achieve. So make sure that you have that goal. Make sure you have that identity, as PK calls it. And it gives you structure and it gives you guidance as to what you might want to do in the future. I'm trying to keep an eye on the stream as well, just to make sure I don't miss any comments or if I have any stream issues. All right, so one of the next areas I think is going to be around the financial limitations. So for many of us, and I've spoken about this a lot in some of my investment videos over the course of the past, how long has it been? 7 months. I started in January, started the channel in January. So over the past 7 months, I talked a lot about the financial aspect of this, especially in the investment videos. And so from that point of view, it's just be very careful. And I know it's easier said than done, and we all make mistakes, and I'm included in this same group of mistakes as well. Be careful that you're not overextending yourself. And that goes for both collecting and investing. And I would probably say it's a lot scarier on the investing side, because once you get in and you start investing and you're looking at deals that are going by and sets that are now phasing out and hard to find, you kind of feel like you're missing out. And it's easy to put yourself in a hole financially very, very quickly. And so be very careful. I would honestly say, as a foundation to any collecting and investing balancing, you start off at the bottom of that foundation with your financial ability. What is it you're able to do, whether that's per week, per paycheck, per month, after you've done everything else? And that's one of the other things I've pointed out a lot in different videos, is to make sure you've covered obviously all your bills, your savings, make sure you have a budget. You've done 401k, you put away some money for emergencies. You've done all the basic things in that regard, and then what you're talking about as far as money is only what's done or left over after that. And I think that's a good foundation. And then, of course, you might want to do many things. You might have other hobbies. You might want to go travel. So make sure that you set aside what is Pokemon money. And let's just call that $100, right? So you have $100 at the end of each month that you want to spend. Okay, well, maybe you alternate, because obviously some products cost more, so you don't want to just buy a fraction of something or buy just a couple of cards sometimes and not really make any real progress. So maybe you do 1 month is investing and 1 month is collecting, or something like that. So take that $100, find the products you're looking for, find the pieces in your collection that you're looking for, and put that out accordingly so that it doesn't overextend yourself. And definitely one of the key aspects would be, don't use your credit card. Now, the only reason I would ever say use your credit card is to say that if you're going, and you can, and you have the funds readily available that are not allocated to anything else, then you can use the credit card for points and, cash back. And there's a lot of benefits once you reach that point financially. But when you're talking about it and you're just getting started and you don't have a large cash reserve or a large set of money aside for these kind of things, doing this could be very dangerous. But if you have that set aside and you say, hey, I spend $1,000 on Pokemon and I can pay it off before the bill is due, then you avoid all the interest rates, which is the dangerous part, and just be very careful and very, I would say, methodical in how you look at using credit. Otherwise, just stick to what you have available in terms of cash and then distribute that between your investment and your collection options accordingly. All right, I'm going to take a little break here. All right. So if we look at then a couple of other areas, and I took some notes here as well, I'm looking down. One of the other things I think is quite important when we talk about investing is how quickly you need the cash. Now, obviously, anything can change. You could lose your job, which I hope you don't. You could have unexpected bills, emergencies, which is why, you should have all of your cash and your reserves and your savings all put aside. And ideally, now I know we can't all do this as easily as others, but you should have emergency money put aside. And just as a small aside, a general rule of thumb, if you're looking at this from like an investment or even a financial perspective, having 3 months of your salary set aside as a basics for what happens if you lose your job should be there. So ideally, even if you lost your job or you had, let's say, another 2 or 3 months of your salary put away for emergency purposes. You need a new roof, AC unit goes out, your car broke down, you name it. It always happens, right? And you don't want to be in a position where you have to try to liquidate your investments before they've matured. And that's really the same for anything. Pokemon, 401k, stocks. If you try to liquidate before that investment's matured, you're often going to take a loss. And although you may get the cash you need at that moment to solve whatever the problem is, ultimately in the long run, you lost and you're not coming out for the better. So definitely look at that from a perspective of making sure you have yourself set up right, as I mentioned earlier, financially, so that you don't have to be so critical in trying to liquidate your Pokemon investments. If you're in a position where you have to, or you feel like you need to constantly liquidate your Pokemon investments for financial needs outside of Pokemon, then you probably shouldn't be investing, and quite honestly, you shouldn't be collecting either. Then you need to handle whatever else the other areas are, put more reserves aside, whatever that case may be, so that the emergency doesn't cause you to make poor decisions about your investments. And I think that's really the takeaway is if you're starving for cash, then don't do either one of these and go back and resolve whatever the issues are outside of this and get your reserves of cash and savings put back to the proper levels. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people will have a hard time with is making this coexisting with collecting and investing. And can they be the same? I would argue to say yes. They can be the same, and that's why we have the word balance in the title for today's video. It is a balance, like most things in life. You can't do too much of anything, even if it's good, right? Working out's good. Staying healthy is good. But if you go to the gym too much, then you overextend your muscles, you don't have time to repair, and you don't actually grow, and you get hurt, you get injured, you're in the hospital. So too much of anything is not good. So having that balance between investing and collecting, again, once everything else is fundamentally taken care of, then it's a little bit about allocation. So taking that foundational asset of cash and what you want to distribute, that then starts to give you the flexibility to choose, okay, that $100 goes 50 here, 50 there, right, as an example. And having the balance between the two, and for me, one of the ways that I do this is I put them in separate places. Everything you see behind me everything you see behind me, I was looking just to see what was in the screenshot, is for me collecting. So every one of the boxes, down here are collecting boxes that I just enjoy, I liked, I want to keep. I have Team Up, I have Ultra Prism, I have other things. I have some nice collection boxes at the top that they're a little bit older. It's got XY, it's got some S, Sun, and Moon sets. These are boxes that we opened here as a family together with some of the Charizard, sets that came out in Christmas last year, as the Crown Zenith set got released. And then I had some of the Japanese boxes. So for me, this is all collecting. My investing, with the side of the case that I brought in for demonstration purposes, is in a whole separate place. I don't keep it here. I don't keep it at the house. I put that somewhere else. And that way it's in safe keepings. If something happened, I don't lose, of course, my investments. The same way you don't want to have tons of cash sitting at your house. It's just a bad idea. God forbid, your house caught fire or you have some type of a natural disaster and you lose everything. It's just a really bad position to be in. And you can avoid that so easily. So separating the two helps to give the ability for them to coexist. Because the other thing is, we're all tempted, myself included, to say, hey, I have this investment of a sealed case. But I really want that Lily card. Or I really want that, Latios card from Team Up. Do I go crack the box? And that's, of course, more about self-control. That's about ensuring that, the balance between those two areas. Knowing that, obviously, the ability to pull some of those cards is extremely, extremely difficult. And you probably will waste, in the case of a Team Up box, $2,000 opening a booster box and not get $2,000 worth of your money. And that's the other thing with collecting, and really the Pokemon hobby as a whole, is remember that this is about the experience. This is about the enjoyment. If you're honestly ripping a pack or a box purely to try to see if you can beat the profits, or beat the spend that you had to make in order to purchase that, then you're probably not going to last very long. You're not going to enjoy it. You're going to get burned more times than not. You're not going to get your money back, especially if you're trying to flip quickly, because those things, you may get your money back if you held, again, going back to investing, for a long period of time. But if you're trying to flip through those quickly, you're probably not going to make your money back, and you're not going to enjoy the experience. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to leave the hobby, and that's not good for anybody. So having the balance between understanding what's investing, put that aside, what's collecting, and keep that in one place. And for me, these boxes behind me, especially the sealed ones, to some degree, some of those I know I'm going to open. Like the collection boxes up here, I don't see those as investments. Those are for me collecting, but those are collections that I want to open. I'll eventually open those boxes, especially those like the 10s behind me as well, like the 10 here. I'll probably open that eventually. Now, the booster boxes, I like looking at a booster box. I like the visual appeal of it. I like the idea of having one booster box for every set. That to me is just appealing and something I'll probably work to achieve one day. And then starting off here, small. But overall, having the balance between the two and keeping them somewhat physically separated gives you the ability to make some better decisions, and then of course protect your assets so that you don't lose them in the event of any natural disaster. So I hope that makes sense. Talking through this as best I can, at least the way that I see it, the way I think about it. But as I always say in my videos, welcome to any feedback, welcome to any criticisms, good or bad, doesn't matter to me. Door's always open. So if you have a different perspective or you think there's something that I've missed or misunderstood, I'll be the first one to say, okay, let's talk about it. I'm even happy to do a podcast with you if you want to talk through it, and we can kind of see where the differences are and maybe try to grow from each other. The next one is when we talk about investing is when to sell. It's something I've definitely went through a lot lately, especially as we opened up the Pokemon Wonder store and trying to get everything set up and all the inventory in there and watching that kind of evolve over time. Is when it comes to investing, and I said this I think in my last video when we talked about some of the pitfalls of Pokemon, is it's not as quick and as liquid as you may think. Now, do people want to buy certain cards? For sure, or certain boxes or sets? 100%. Do they want to buy them at the price that you're selling it? Maybe, maybe not. Do they want to buy it from a seller that doesn't have a lot of feedback, maybe is somewhat new to the market? Maybe not. Do they want to take that risk? So there's a lot of factors to it. And one of the things that I'm trying to continuously iterate to the community, just to make sure everybody's aware, I want people to know what they're getting into. I want them to have a very clear expectation of how this will work for them in the future. The investing perspective is great. I love it a lot. I do it myself. I talk about it quite often, almost every couple of weeks on the channel. But it's not as liquid as you think, meaning that. And of course, you can compare this to the same comparison everybody else always does. If I sell my stocks, I hit a button, wait maybe a couple of business days, and I got my money. That's easy. That's liquid. Or the most liquid is I just go take out the money from the bank and I have my cash. So, I mean, that's the most liquid. Then you get into stocks and selling, which is probably somewhere secondary. Then you get into assets like Pokemon or other physical goods. And to sell it, to get it in the right marketplace, to take into account the fees, to take into account the taxes, to take into account the shipping, so on and so on, it takes time. It takes time. And again, not being a seller in those marketplaces for a long time, and then you maybe do consignment, and then there's other fees to be associated with that. That really then cuts into your profits, which then ask yourself the question, is this the right time to sell? Because now I have to subtract 20% of the gains, and I'm only getting 5% or 10%. So those are definitely the considerations. I want to keep making sure that I iterate here on the channel. It's not as quick as you think. Some things are. I mean, don't get me wrong, nothing is everything, or nothing's all the time any one way. But for sure, there are going to be many, many things, and I would say the majority of things don't move as fast as you would want them to. And then those that move fast, great, good, it's a quick win, good for you, but most of it won't. And I'll give you a real world example. So I was recently testing out some theories around auctions. I saw a couple of recommendations from Dan at Catch 'em All Collectibles. Shout out to Dan. Watch a lot of your content, Dan. I hope the new smoker you bought is going well. And they made some comments, so did PK, around auctions and how well auctions work and compared to buy it now on eBay when it's a very liquid, very desirable product. And so I wanted to test the theory. And so what I did is I actually sold a Team Up booster box. I didn't really want to sell it, but I wanted to run this, kind of experiment for fun. And that's probably the most liquid asset I have at that time when I did this. And so I put it on auction. And I did the paid promotion. So I think that was $20. I think it was $20. So I paid $20 for the paid promotion from eBay. And of course, then the percentage of the auction fees and everything else when the auction finished. And then I waited for the 7 days. I think I did a 7-day auction, if I'm not mistaken. And I was curious if that would sell better than the buy it now price that I also had it listed for. So I had one Team Up booster box that sat there at a buy it now price. And I think at the time, because this was a couple months back, by the way, if you don't know me very well, I'm not good with time frames. So time frames for me is a bit of a black hole. But I did this about a month or so ago, and I sold the Team Up booster box, I had that buy it now Team Up booster box at about $1,800. And that's when the prices were still kind of climbing up. But then I did the auction with the paid promotion. And that one, I never sold the buy it now. So the buy it now at that moment in time, and the same time frame, because I stopped the auction, I stopped the buy it now at the time the auction finished. So at the $1,800 for buy it now, it never sold. I did the same thing for the auction on a Team Up Booster box, and it sold for $2,150, almost $2,200. And so I wanted to validate this kind of idea that Dan at Catch 'em All Collectibles and PK had mentioned, and I find it 100% true. And that kind of goes back to the point of having some of the liquidity in your investments. So there are going to be things that are very liquid, and there's kind of unique ways, and that's why I bring this up and share that experience with you, so that you know what we're kind of doing in some cases to help make that more liquid. But most of the time, you won't have that liquidity in your products. So just be aware of that. Make sure that you're very mindful that even though you're sitting on a ton of probably very valuable products, you can't move them as quickly as you probably wanted to. And if you did, I'm glad for you. But most of the time, it takes time. I've seen many, many examples where people have bought massive inventory, and it takes them 6 months, a year to sell off that inventory. And then they have to go and make all the shipments and all of the packaging and the costs and the fees. So there's just a lot to take into consideration. A couple of key things I also, while I'm on that rant about kind of selling and looking at the investment side of it, is I actually look at that as a very even 20%. And that's a little bit high, to be honest. eBay typically is around 12%. And of course, as you sell more and you get bigger, you can get better discounts. But as a general rule, 12 to 15% and another 5 or so percent, 5 to 7% on your shipping costs. And that kind of gives you a good perspective of what you're going to have left at the end of the sale. And so if you subtract, and this is the way I do all of my investments tracking. So as I buy a product, I list the price that I bought it for. I watch the market price month over month. And then I just subtract 20%. And I kind of watch that. And I see, okay, well, based on what I bought it for, I have a gain of X. Well, if I subtract 20% from that, what does that leave me with? And of course, that's kind of when I look at this to see when's a good time to sell. Is the market in a good place where this might be the best opportunity? But overall, I typically hold those for quite some time. But just as a general rule of thumb, 20% is a pretty good number. All right, so the next topic I think we'll dive into a little bit is going to be also when you're selling, it depends on the circumstances. By all means, my collection, if I got into a really bad hardship with family or my kids or my wife, everything's for sale. And I think we all kind of say the same thing. I would sell my collection in a heartbeat if I had something more serious, because family is more important than cardboard, right, at the end of the day. So those are the kind of things that just be aware that we all are going to be sitting in the same space when emergencies come and we don't have the liquidity or the funds to take care of that emergency. Then yes, by all means, it's going to be for sale. But for the most part, if you're in a good position, you have your savings, you have your nest egg, you have a good job, a solid income, you're paying your bills, investing into your 401k, then great. Then from that point of view, it's very circumstantial as to when to sell. I don't necessarily have a certain number. So I don't when I think about selling a product, I don't do it based on, oh, and now it's at 50%. Now I'm going to sell it. Or it's at 200%. Now I'm going to sell it. I'd actually just wait until those numbers are really in thousands of percents. So when I see upwards of 6, 7, 8, 900%, that's when I look to start selling for me. I don't have an exact number. I don't really care, because at that point, again, I want to make sure that everything else is financially in a good place, from the savings to the nest eggs. And I don't care that I'm sitting on the product. And I think that's another great point. If you're investing in Pokemon, but you're worried about the time frame your cash is being held up, then you probably shouldn't be investing in Pokemon. You're going to invest and you're going to hold for some time if you're really going to see the big gains. There's going to be exceptions. We saw that in 2020 and 2021, where you could buy something at Walmart and then flip it and make a profit. And that's great, but that's not consistent. And now we can see that the market is adjusting itself. We just got into Scarlet and Violet, and it went right back down. We're selling now below distribution prices. A lot of the boxes for Scarlet and Violet and Paldea Evolved. You can't go buy that, at Walmart and flip it and make a profit. So from that point of view, if you're looking to really make that money fast, then you shouldn't be investing. because that's not what that's for. Then you should focus on flipping. If you want to make the whole flipping, then that's great. There's a market for that as well, and I see that primarily as single cards. If you're going to be flipping, then do that with single cards. You buy out collections, you buy singles, you grade them, and you sell the graded cards, and that's the best way to make money quickly. And I say quickly, that's anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks to maybe 30 to 90 days. So when you're wanting to make money that quickly, that's the best way to go. Excuse me. And I know that, Retrospecs and a few others in this space, shout out to Retro. He does a great job at that. That's exactly what he does all day long. And he does a really great job at it. So does Dan at Catch 'em All Collectibles. They do a little bit of the flipping. Now, Dan gets a little bit into a weird space with his collecting versus investing, but I like Dan's comments on that. Everything's inventory for tax purposes, and that's probably the right answer. But overall, I would definitely say that if you're worried about the time frame, then don't invest, because it's not. You shouldn't be worried about turning that into cash so quickly, because it's going to put you in a bad position, and you're probably going to make a poor decision as to when to sell. All right, so we've been running for, what do we got? I'm looking at this. Oh, wow. It's already been 40 minutes. So time is flying. Let me take a drink here. Apple juice, of course. So now, I think one of the other things I wanted to point out when we go through this is making sure you do this and it's fun. And I'm looking at my notes here, but make sure it's fun. If you're collecting and you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. So collecting has to be enjoyable. And that's really the same thing for any hobby. If you're not enjoying it, you're not going to keep doing it. You're just going to get out. And I think part of the enjoyment comes with structure. And I'll go a little bit from a psychological standpoint. I did a lot of the self-improvement as I met my wife, and we were learning together, and really it was exponential in terms of the growth that we had, both of us. But speaking for myself, having that structure of where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do really gives a focus. And when you have that focus, the phrase goes, attention goes where energy flows. And so from that point of view, what you put your focus on, you're going to tend to find a way to make it happen. And the harder you focus on it, the more you're going to make that a reality. And so if you then transpose that idea to your collecting goals, it's going to make that fun, because it's not just about, completing the binder here of the Crown Zenith. It's more about the journey and going through that process and hunting the cards and, filling those spots and looking at the partially complete binder and what cards are left. And it's part of that experience. And that's also where the growth happens. A lot of the growth in anything that we do in life happens in the journey, not in the completion of the goal. Because we've often been there, and I've had this conversation with tons of my friends and family. But when you probably had something like college. So when you graduated college, or maybe high school, or you achieved some goal of your own, maybe it's weight loss or whatever it may be, and you got to that point and you said, oh, is that it? Well, what do I do now? What's next, right? And those can be very defining moments, because if you're not thinking about the bigger picture, and I'll tie this back to collecting in just a minute, but if you're not thinking about the bigger picture, you're going to find yourself disappointed, and then you're going to lose your way. You're going to lose the path that you want to be on for the long journey. And many of us reach those moments and say, okay, hey, we graduated school, or we got the big job, or we reached that new pay amount we wanted to make in our yearly salary. And we look at that and we say, wow, that's it, I did it. But now what do I do? And all the euphoria and all the excitement is gone almost like that. And that's actually when a lot of depression sets in for people that are coming, out of school and going into the workforce. It happens because they didn't have anything planned after that. They thought everything was going to be great and gravy after they reached some milestone. Well, the same thing happens in collecting. So you need to really be clear that, for me, I know I have some short-term goals around collecting Sword and Shield and getting a master set on every set. I have some long-term goals to move back to Sun and Moon and X and Y, and of course a lot of the older sets. I have goals around booster boxes, and when I have one booster box per every set. There's some Holy Grail cards I would love to have. So I have lots of those little goals that I'm tweaking and adjusting along the way. But it's also not about that. It's about the journey and making sure you enjoy it. So if you don't enjoy the collecting experience, I would say take a moment, look back at what you're trying to achieve, and set some goals for yourself. And I think that's probably one of the best things you can look at when it comes to collecting. Now, investing, on the other hand, I enjoy it. For me, I mean, as personally, I do enjoy investing in Pokemon. I just enjoy everything around Pokemon, to be honest with you. But investing's a little bit different. I don't wake up every morning, excited to make the next investment purchase. I mean, sometimes I am, especially when like new sets come out and things like that. And it's fun to do the hunt. It's fun to look for, the great deal. But then the question is that deal going to be for my collection journey or for my investing journey? So for me, I definitely see a lot more of the excitement evolving around collecting as a collector. And there is still some, because you want to have some excitement in anything in life, otherwise it's not worth doing, in investing, but maybe less so, in my opinion at least. All right, I think we're still good. I hope the chat went okay in terms of the views and not having any issues on the lagging. I'll have to see. I've only done a couple of lives. Actually, only done one live, and the other ones were done as a recording, and I kind of just took the recording afterwards. The setup seems to be working okay, so fingers crossed. I hope this worked out. So we'll probably wrap it up with this. We're moving into 45 minutes, so we're definitely quite a long ways into the stream. But then I think we'll end it on probably one of the last points. And that's going to be Pokemon in general. So for Pokemon in general, for me, I really got into this because my kids had been asking for it for many years. I was a baseball and basketball card collector growing up. That's what I loved. I still have all the cards, actually. And it was just a pure joy for me. And I played basketball, so I was playing it. I was collecting it. I was reading the books. All that kind of fun stuff. And so that really transposed quite well for me as my kids got into Pokemon. And as I've said in many other of my recordings in the past, that was in roughly November of last year, but really big in December, in Christmas time. And then it just kind of went right off and took me back into that, childhood nostalgia. And so for me, Pokemon is something I actually truly enjoy. And to be able to combine both investing and collecting, and for me, I also play a TCG game. I plan on playing in the tournament again next year. I do a little bit of everything. I play the TCG live. So for me, to be able to combine all these facets of something that I enjoy just makes it that much more amazing and that much more of just a great journey. And so I hope that all of you can find that joy and excitement in Pokemon into whatever facet you're into, whether it's just collecting or it's just TCG game or whatever it may be. I hope that you do find that enjoyment, because it does make life worth living when you have many of those things, plus your friends and your family and good love and connections. I think it's where the fun is in life, and it's where the joy is in life. So I hope you do find that in Pokemon. If not, go somewhere that you do and make sure that you give that your energy and your time, because that's where, again, the fun in life is. I hope you enjoyed today's Pokemon Rants. I'll try to see if I can schedule. I've been talking to Ryan at Pika Pika Papa. He's another PokeTuber, done a great job, really heavy on the investing space. I'll try to see. We've been talking a little bit. Maybe we can get him in for the first interview, and we'll kind of go through a couple of things. There's also a few other people I would love to get on the channel, so I'll be reaching out to them, trying to get them scheduled in. I'll keep you posted on the next Pokemon Rants. And as always, we appreciate your time. We wish you a great rest of your Sunday, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.